have a quorum. A quorum is present. Today, just so that you will have a roadmap as to what to expect in today's hearing, we will be hearing an overview on UI from DEED with plenty of time for members to ask questions. Then we'll go to Senate File 661 and Senate File 799 from Senator Gustafson, followed by Senate File 901 from Senator Pratt, and then also Senate File 922 from Senator Hur. And last but certainly not least, then we'll hear Senate File number 1079 from Senator Mohamed. As I like to always mention, just so that everyone has a sense of what's going on, as you can see that we have a full agenda today, so we will be limiting our testifiers to 2 minutes. This was posted also on the committee website, and all testifiers have been made aware of this in advance. So up first, we're going to have DEED. So if we can get the Deputy Commissioner Rowe to come on up. And he'll walk us through the UI issues. And Senator, excuse me, Commissioner, Deputy Commissioner Rowe, it's my understanding that you also received a list of questions that the committee wanted to have answered. Did you get that information?
Senator, Mr. Chair, I'm not actually 100% sure that I did. Do you know when those were sent? Was that the earlier list?
I don't know what your colleague's title is, Devin?
Okay. Yeah.
So did he receive that information?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, so Devin, are you going to be the one to walk through the questions or answer the questions that have been submitted by the committee? And you probably want to come to the table because we did give you all ample opportunity to have that information. Identify yourself for the record, that'd be great.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, is this the list of questions Senator Pratt followed up on a couple days ago? Because those I did receive and
yes, so
we're prepared to walk through with the presentation.
There were two. There was a list of questions that were initially sent by the committee, and then Senator Pratt sent a follow-up as well as some questions that he wanted to have answered. So we wanted to make sure that you are in receipt of those questions and you're prepared to answer those questions either as a part of Deputy Commissioner Rowe's testimony or separately, because we will go through each one of them and expect an answer.
Certainly, Mr. Chair, certainly. And I think over the course of the presentation, I think we will kind of I think there will be answers to those questions, and anything where we might need some additional follow, we will very happily do so.
That is great. Thank you, Deputy Commissioner Rowe. So if you can go forward with your presentation, that'd be great. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think there is I think members all have a packet of slides. I think I'm plugged in right now. Do we need to switch an input source or? I don't know. If members would prefer to just follow along in their packets, I can certainly just present.
It'd be good for the others to make sure that this is working, because we'd like for everyone to have the information. All right. And it looks like it's ready there. Okay. Thank you.
And just in preface, we have attempted to provide a lot of content on, a lot of data for members so that we can kind of walk through, kind of provide some context around the program overall, since it's been a little while since I think we've talked UI as within this committee. I'm not going to touch on all the program basic slides just because I know there's several kind of items on the committee's agenda. But if there's anything that I'm going through too quickly, please just slow me down, and happy to kind of go in as much detail. So we'll just walk through a few program basics, and then kind of talk through both sides of the UI Trust Fund, revenues and expenditures, and then wanted to leave a little bit of time at the end to discuss some administrative items that I think are relevant to the overall conversation. And I guess at any point, of course, feel free to stop me if I'm going too fast or if there's anything I can clarify in these remarks. So just to set the table, a couple program basics. I won't go through all these slides in depth, but the purpose of unemployment insurance, as written in statute, is that the public good is promoted by providing workers who are unemployed through no fault of their own a temporary partial wage replacement to assist the unemployed worker to become reemployed. And I think all of those words are very intentional in the statute. unemployed through no fault of their own. That means they're not quitting. It's if they are, if they are laid off from their work. A temporary partial wage replacement. It's for a period of 26 weeks, unless there are special federal programs in place, and partial wage replacement, 50% generally of their income before layoff, up to a statutory maximum. And the purpose is to help assist those bumps in the labor market to help them become reemployed. And those you've got sort of those points behind it. It's worth noting that unemployment insurance is a federal-state partnership. It was created by the Social Security Act of 1935, and states have flexibility to adjust some certain program parameters, but not all of them. States must conform to various components of federal law. States must administer the program in compliance with federal guidance, and administrative funding is federal, and it's conditional upon those two items, conformity and compliance with federal law. And UI, it's worth noting, is multiple benefit programs in one. There are some that are always active, and then there are others that are only periodically active due to generally a national recession or kind of significant issues that might arise in the course of the economy. We provided just some context numbers around programmatic activity. I'm not going to read all of these for you, but happy to answer any questions about any of them that you might have. And then we'll talk about this a little bit more towards the end of the presentation as well, but it's worth noting that the funding model, benefits are funded after, not before. UI is not a forward-funded program in the way that you might think, in the way that many state programs are, where you have an appropriation and then the money is spent until it exists until expended. We receive taxes and reimbursements quarterly. Benefit payments are conducted daily. Our highest receipts are generally in the Q1 payment because the taxable wage base is below the state's average annual wage. We'll get into that in a bit more detail. And as kind of an order of magnitude, the rate structure can take about 18 months to respond to a downturn or a period of higher payout. Minnesota is also a very seasonal state when it comes to unemployment insurance. Our amount the amount that we are paying out varies significantly by the time of the year, and the general principle is we pay out more in the winter than in other times of the year when industries such as construction go more dormant. And then the UI Trust Fund is the deposit mechanism that is held in trust by the U.S. Treasury. The money is held at the U.S. Treasury. We do daily draws against the Treasury account for our benefit purposes. So there are two parts to what makes up the trust fund. You've got your revenues and you've got your expenditures, sources and uses. And we'll go through each in turn. The revenues are tax collections from tax-paying employers and employer reimbursements from reimbursing employers, and then the expenditures are the benefit payments to recipients. So a walkthrough on the revenue structure. So the way that UI taxes work, just very briefly, is there's two components, an experience rate and a base tax rate, and those are multiplied by the taxable wages that an employer paid to its employees. So the experience rate, the part on the left, is based on the usage of the program, and that provides the bulk of the tax collections under the program. It's calculated over the past 4 years of history, unless it's a new employer, in which case the employer is assigned a rate based on their industry. The base tax rate is the same rate for all tax-paying employers. And then the taxable wages is a figure that's adjusted annually. So that's the amount per employee, the maximum that you would pay per employee. It's a similar concept to the Social Security wage cap. And then just a brief kind of expansion. There are times, and now is where there are a couple additional assessments that can supplement the UI tax rate. An additional assessment is triggered when the trust fund drops below a certain level, and the rates for that additional assessment are 0%, 5%, 10%, and 14%. Essentially, there is surtax applied on the initial amount due. If we are in borrowing status with the U.S. Treasury, as we were during the pandemic, there's also a special assessment that can be triggered. That is not active right now. How are experience rates set? So as I mentioned, it's based on an employer's use of the UI program, and the formula is 1.25 times the UI benefits paid to an employer's employees over the employer's taxable payroll. And the rate, an experience rate can range from 0.0% up to 8.9%, which is a statutory cap listed in law. That's calculated, as I mentioned, based on the past 4 years of history. I'll note this will come up in our discussion, I'm sure, that pandemic-related charges are not factored in due to the trust fund replenishment law. That we'll return to that theme. And as I briefly said, the new employers are assigned an industry-specific rate for their first 2 years of operation. Just a bit of context on the trust fund replenishment, because this is a big factor, I think, as we kind of go through the conversation about experience rates and overall collections. Overall, when the trust fund falls, the experience rating mechanism comes in. So essentially, if an employer lays off more staff, their experience rate, and they incur more UI charges, their experience rate will go up over time. That's a mechanism that allows the fund to regain balance over time, as it's based on sort of a rolling 4-year window. Following the Great Recession in the early 2010s, base tax rates, additional assessments, and experience rates all went up. However, per these kind of specifics of the trust fund replenishment legislation, the pandemic-related layoffs were removed in calculating the employer's experience rating. And it's worth noting that that has saved employers hundreds of millions of dollars per year in charges that they would have otherwise paid in the experience rate. The trust fund replenishment law also set the base rate to 0.1% and the additional assessment to 0.0%. So it was effectively leading to tax savings for employers across Minnesota. The base tax rate is based on a formula that's outlined in Minnesota statutes, where it's tied to the balance of the trust fund on March 31st over the total wages and covered employment. Again, the purpose of having this outlined in a formula and sort of written in statute is that it ensures self-balancing of the trust fund and the ability to be ready for the next recession. And it's two kind of absolute dollar values, because you want, as total wages grow over time, so would kind of benefit payments over time. So there's sort of an element where you want to maintain a consistent ratio there. In 2025, the base rate is 0.4% with a 5% additional assessment. I'll just, as a quick percentages note, that doesn't mean the effective rate is 5.4%. It means that you multiply 0.4 times 1.05, just for context. And we have the kind of the full ratios. These are in law in the table on the right-hand side, but they're just included for ease of reference. The taxable wage base is indexed, again, in law, to 60% of the state's average wage for the previous calendar year. And again, employers only pay taxes up to this amount. So in 2025, employers only pay taxes on the first $43,000 of wages in covered employment. States set different values for this. So the different pieces taken all together, the point each, just in terms of order of magnitude, this changes over time as the size of the economy grows. Each 0.1% increment on the base tax rate is about $80 million in collections. The experience rating portion of UI tax has historically, and again, this would vary as experience rates change, comprise about $650 million in collections. And on the next slide, we've kind of broken out collections by type over the past about 15 years to provide just some context around the various components of UI tax collections over the last 15 years. And we wanted to go back to 2010, because that was a period when the program was kind of recovering from the Great Recession, and just so you can see how the inflows have changed over time. Again, over the last few years, base tax rate has kind of sort of subtly increased, and that's largely as the taxable wage base has grown. The experience rating values have stayed really consistent, and we'll get into a bit of a deeper dive here as to why we believe that to be the case. So experience rates are capped at 8.9% per statute. And there are some seasonal employers in the state that would probably be at like nearly a 100% experience rate if it was not for that cap, because they, if they're heavily seasonal, they lay off all or the vast majority of their staff as the seasons change. Experience rates are delayed by design. An experience rate, or an increase in experience rate sort of lags between 18 months and 2 years after the increase in activity. And we tried to just provide a little bit of a chart here that helps break down like what are the windows for the experience rating period for a particular tax year, just so that you sort of have a visual for that. It's kind of small, but that was the best we could do with the image ratio. And it's also just worth noting for the committee's benefit that experience rates have no impact on an employer that has gone out of business or left the state. A business that closes doesn't end up paying for the resultant unemployment. that's why you have a base tax mechanism, is to kind of cover for some of those pieces. And just an illustrative example, right? An employer that comes into the state to, say, do a large construction project will come in with the average tax rate for their industry, and then when the project ends, won't incur the higher rate because they no longer have employees in the state. It's possible that many of them weren't even kind of Minnesota workers to begin with, but these are sort of the elements that can lead, sort of the complexities that can occur. And on the next slide, really just wanted to provide the committee with some fairly granular data on average experience rates, pre-pandemic and kind of going up to 2024. And again, it's worth noting that the average experience rates across industries have generally gone down since 2018. There are a couple where it's inched up, but you've really seen, and especially, and even in industries like construction, which are generally at the max rate of 8.9%, there's been a general decline in experience rates by industry. Obviously, it's calculated for each individual employer, and so your mileage may vary depending on the nature of one's business. So that's revenues. Moving on to expenditures. So how are benefits calculated? To be eligible, an applicant must have wage credits of 5.3% of the state's average annual wage. The state's average annual wage is $71,292 for the purposes of this calculation, so 5.3% of that average is $37.78. Then, the benefit amount is generally 50% of an applicant's average wage for that base period, up to a statutory maximum this year, $914 per week. And we recalculate those amounts every October based on updated economic data. I think there's been just some questions about, like, why are we seeing benefit payments why have we seen kind of total benefit outlays increase? And I would just note, just trying to provide a little bit of contextual comparison. This is a trend that we've seen kind of across the country, and tried to draw out a few peer states. Just for the sake of comparison, I think Minnesota is experiencing very similar trends to what other states are around the country. So then that sort of naturally gets into the question of why, right? Why, why when we see, historically low unemployment, what's happening, and offer a few hypotheses here. First, I think one fact is that benefit payments increase more when wage growth is higher. That's certain, that is certainly an element where, wages have been on the increase over the past few years. But again, there's this national trend, and I think one piece is that, the end of some of the COVID era, I think during the COVID era programs, there was a bit of, there was less movement in the labor market. People tended to stay in jobs longer. And I think just anecdotally, we're starting to see a return to a more normal cycle of employer hiring and layoffs. Again, the overall unemployment rate is low, but I think there is more activity in terms of layoffs that we're seeing, just kind of as part of the normal business cycle. Another point that I think we've heard discussed around the country is that during the pandemic there was significant substantial usage of unemployment insurance, and including people who had not previously used that program. That in some ways may have led to awareness. That means that people are now more aware of their rights to to collect unemployment insurance if they are faced with a layoff. So that sort of increased usage during the pandemic has made them more aware of the program in normal times. That's a hypothesis, but it's plausible. And again, I think I've kind of covered some of this, but just the way that taken together, the way that the mechanisms work with the trust, with revenue collection and benefit payments, the increase in benefit payments will always precede an increase in taxes or reimbursements, because essentially the increase in the benefit payments will tend to reduce the trust fund. Then then tax rates are recalculated both on the experience rate and the base rate for the subsequent years after that happens. And it's worth noting that taxes can lag 2 years. Reimbursements that we receive from employers always lag by about 6 months. Taxes can lag 2 years or more. And it kind of makes sense if you're in a normal recession. You don't want, having a bit of a lag is healthy as employers are trying to rehire, and having some delay so that you can smooth it out over time is useful. And that's the benefit of the trust fund, right? It allows increases in benefit payments to occur without the need to immediately raise taxes or borrowing, but it doesn't go on indefinitely. During a recession, I think, as this committee knows, the trust fund can drop very quickly. And again, non-recessionary changes in the economy can impact benefits, whether that's higher interest rates slowing construction, closure of businesses, or higher activity levels in industries with historically low experience rates. So sort of a whirlwind tour of revenues and expenditures through the trust fund. I do have a couple program, just administrative items that might be helpful leading into a discussion. I think one question that comes up a lot, and very appropriately so, is just program integrity. Are we doing are we doing everything we can to ensure that we are running a tight ship? I'll just note, looking at the federal data, according to the Department of Labor, Minnesota UI has one of the lowest fraud rates in the country, under 1.4%, and we have some of the highest payment accuracy rates in the country, again, per federal data. I have provided on this next table, and apologies for the font size, sort of the full list of states. But again, I just wanted to provide that data in context for members' information, and just to provide that I think we are a strongly performing state on both fronts. We comfortably beat U.S. DOL thresholds for improper payments, and these data are based on sort of an exhaustive peer-reviewed audit of sampled cases. And worth noting, I think, the program was reviewed in 2022 by the Office of the Legislative Auditor. We're constantly making investment in technical tools and improved business process and monitoring, and we're reviewed by multiple agencies each year, the IRS, Social Security Administration, and third-party auditors in that regard. Another component I think that's really important is just supporting Minnesotans in job search. As the enabling statute notes, the purpose of the unemployment insurance is to help people get back into the labor force. Most states participate in a program through the U.S. DOL known as the Reemployment Services and Eligibility Assessment Program. What that is it targets people who are most likely to remain out of work for longer with customized employment services. From 2021 to 2024, the latest data that we have, we ranked 5th in the country in RESEA sessions completed per capita, and we've used kind of novel approaches, telephone outreach to get in touch with applicants. It supports program integrity because it helps with identity verification, but even more than that, it helps provide and connect people with the services that they need to get training, to get connected with employment, and get them back to work faster. And it provides an integrity check for the program as well. And just one last thing I'll note, we are constantly making investments to improve the business process and technology in the unemployment insurance program. I just provided a very long list of projects that the team is working on and or has closed over the past year, and just wanted to provide just an example of ways we have moved from a kind of mid-2000s sort of user interface to this over the past few years, mobile responsive, multilingual, easy to use on a smartphone. And that, again, is good for applicants because it makes it easier for them to do the right thing and provide simple answers to the questions. It's also good for program security and integrity. So with that, that concludes my presentation, and I'm very happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so very much. We're going to start with Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, a very informative report. And it reminded me of a question that I know a lot of my constituents have, and I'm wondering how that 4-year look back on that experience rating, how is that going to impact our school districts? So a lot of the employees who were part-time employees, summertime employees, for example, are now able to file unemployment, or they have unemployment benefits. And I'm just curious, how is that going to impact our schools, the experience rating, the cost, and when might they see that?
Deputy Commissioner Rowe.
Mr. Chair, Senator Nelson, thank you for the question. And this was one thing I guess I didn't fully cover in the presentation, which is the vast majority of school districts, and if not all of them, are not actually taxed. They are reimbursing employers in the UI program. And I didn't go into depth on that because it's a relatively small percentage of the overall fund. But just to provide a brief explanation, most units of government, including school districts, many nonprofits, they don't pay the base tax and experience rate. Instead, they directly reimburse the state and the UI trust fund for any benefits that are incurred on a dollar-for-dollar basis. That's a provision in Minnesota's UI law, and I think for many of those employers, it works better for them historically. They can choose to become tax-paying employers if they want to, but I think for districts, they're generally not experience rated. Now, I think many of them have seen unemployment insurance costs increase because of the new eligibility that was rolled out as part of the laws of 2023, and I believe Minnesota Department of Education has compiled a report. I think for each of the last 2 years that breaks out district by district impacts on that front.
Senator Nelson, follow up?
Yep, just thank you very much, and thanks for that clarity, and I will look for that report. Just to note, I think perhaps that will determine, maybe more of those questions, but who determines then the amount? I imagine that goes through the UI department, and then you tell, just what's the process for that, like direct payment? How's that work?
To the testifier.
Mr. Chair, Senator Nelson. So it works the same as it does for any other employer and any other applicant in UI. An applicant is laid off, so they apply to the UI program, answer a series of questions, and then as part of the UI program, the employer has their dashboard where they receive a kind of a list of all the issues. They can dispute things where facts may not be aligned, or there may where they may need to raise issues in the account. If necessary, it can go to appeal. So the mechanism of all that is exactly the same. And an employer in their online unemployment insurance account, has access to the kind of data and claims information that they would otherwise have. One thing I left out in my previous answer, just that I would also note, the 2023, laws 2023, which expanded the kind of, which removed the exclusion of those hourly school workers from the Minnesota UI law. There was a one-time appropriation that was issued as part of that districts have had access to for the last couple of years.
Senator Nelson, before we go to Senator Draheim. Senator Nelson. Your mic is not on, Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So do you know then, has that one-time appropriation to our school districts, has that been sufficient to pay for their increased costs for unemployment benefits?
Deputy Commissioner Rowe.
Mr. Chair, Senator Nelson, yes, it's been. I think that for the last 2 years, it has been sufficient, and I think the MDE report has a little bit more on kind of where that sits.
Thank you. If you could send that to me, please. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Draheim.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Deputy Commissioner, for working on this. I know we've had a lot of discussion on it, and I do appreciate it. So just to clarify what the line of questions that Senator Nelson was going down, the reimbursing group, that percentage really hasn't changed much in the last couple of years.
To the testifier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Senator. I'll go back to the table, the table of collections, just because I think that's actually on. There's no slide number. I'm sorry. No, we definitely have seen the total value of reimbursements go up over the past couple of years. In part, perhaps in part because of the policy change. But what I would note is that would not have a net effect on the trust fund because it's effectively immediately reimbursed over the within 3 to 6 months of the expenses being incurred. Did I answer your question, or was I missing something there?
Senator Draheim, follow up.
Yep, thank you. No, I was just wondering if, what percentage of the UI fund is the reimbursing one, and has that changed over the last 4 years?
Deputy Commissioner Rowe.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chair and Senator. Yeah, I think it absolutely has, the kind of collections from reimbursing employers, because school, I think, I don't want to say that it's entirely driven by that change, but as you can see in this table right here, from 2015 to, say, 2019, kind of the last pre-pandemic year, we were tending to sit at around about $45 million in reimbursing charges. That has gone up over the past couple of years. Certainly the hourly school workers bill was one element to that. I don't want to say that that was the only element. There was no kind of policy change otherwise that I'm aware of that would have led to that. But, part of that also just is, there may be increased activity from those employers as well.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Draheim.
Thank you. And then on the, thank you, Chair. The slide that says average experience rating across industries have generally gone down. And that, I guess, is part of my confusion on why we're depleting our fund. When I did a quick count between 23 and 24, rates were higher in 25 different categories, not by much, there's just a sliver. In 25 of those different categories in 23, and then in 24, only 3 were higher. So statistically, you wouldn't think that would affect the fund. So what, in your opinion, what is the biggest factor why we've drained down our EUI fund?
Deputy Commissioner Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Senator Draheim. No, I think what it comes down to, I think really what it comes down to is, the collections that the collections that you see on this slide have roughly stayed flat, with the exception of reimbursements, which have grown, but they're reimbursements, so there's no net effect on the trust fund, right? At the same time, the benefit payments have grown for some that we have seen over the past couple of years. So collections flat, benefit payments growing. I think that has been the issue that that I would say is kind of what has led to the reduced balance in the trust fund.
Senator Draheim, follow-up?
Follow-up, thank you. So, do you think we need to raise that $43,000 base tax rate, or the taxation up to $43,000 in wages?
Deputy Commissioner Rowe.
Mr. Chair, Senator Draheim, there's. So I guess part of what I'm hoping to convey through the presentation is there is already built into law a self-correcting mechanism, right? That over time will sort of, through the mechanisms of base tax rate and eventually through the reemergence of the experience rating mechanism, should help the fund recover over time, and it's sort of built into law, and I think the law, the exact mechanisms in the law, I think proceed certainly me, perhaps many of you, but I think they are meant to be kind of self-reinforcing. They work over time. It's not on a one-year time horizon. It occurs over years, and again, I think that's somewhat intentional, so that you don't have big, to the extent that you can avoid big swings. That's certainly the hope, but I think. So no, I think at this time, there's nothing that we're proposing at this time, certainly.
And Deputy Commissioner Rowe, you talked about the benefit payments growth. Is a contributing factor to that growth because we pay higher wages or anything of that nature? Can you speak to that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, that is certainly a factor, right? Just as the taxable wage base is indexed to inflation, so our benefit payments are also indexed to inflation, as and as wages have grown, so have benefit payments to a certain extent. So,
did you have a follow-up before I go to Senator Pratt?
I have 2 more if I could.
Yes.
And then I'll
go
try
ahead,
to
you're
make
fine.
it quick.
Senator Draheim.
And then just so I understand, thank you for the answer. Thank you, Chair. When we look at the benefit payments, we're paying out a little over almost $1.3 billion, right? And then if I come here to your full data with the improper payment rate, 7.424 of the $1.3 billion was improper.
Commissioner Rowe, Deputy Commissioner Rowe.
Yes. So, Mr. Chair and Senator Draheim, so I want to be the USDOL's term here is improper payments, and I'm reproducing that term because that is what they call it. I want to be very clear that improper payments are not fraud. They are two different things. Improper payments are, like, I want to say from memory, like 95% of those things are when an applicant or an employer, when there's an overpayment issued to an applicant or because of data that was provided to the program that was inaccurate. Those things are generally corrected later on through the normal programmatic mechanisms that we have, right, as we get new wage detail and those items. But it's not, I just want to emphasize that, that's a term of art that's provided by DOL on that front.
Senator Drahan.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Deputy Commissioner. So I guess of that 7.424%, I see 1.358% are the fraud, and we'll get to that in a second. But of the improper payment, how much of that is recouped back into the fund, other than the fraud rate?
Yeah.
Deputy Commissioner Rowe.
Mr. Chair and Senator Draheim, I guess this is one where, like, the term is not like what is an improper payment is primarily it is like an administrative mechanism that the US DOL has to assess program performance over the country. I would not interpret that number to mean that 7.4% of the payments are fully inaccurate. It's more as they do a really detailed review of of kind of each UI case. That's an incident where they see that, with kind of a full audit and full kind of complete review of, like, an exhaustive review of a case, that that a claim would have been paid at a different amount. So it's not so. So I would say that by and large, a large percentage of those are kind of caught and recouped through kind of the normal programmatic mechanisms. I don't have an exact number because it's sort of a tool that's used to help states improve their business processes and isn't meant as sort of like a flag in the ground to say here is the dollar value of kind of fraudulent claims. So it's sort of a strange and somewhat unsatisfying answer, I recognize, but kind of happy to go into more depth as helpful.
Senator Draheim.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Deputy Commissioner. So if simple math, that's almost $96 million. Yeah. So it would be nice if you could clarify to the committee, how much of that are we recouping, and has that changed over the last couple of years? So even if we look at just the fraud rate at 1.35, that's $17.5 million. And I guarantee everybody sitting back there who's coming up here to ask for money would love a piece of that $17.5 million. Go ahead, Chair.
Were you done with your question? Or
No, I'm just, I guess my question, is there a trend line on that? It seems very low, but it's still a lot of money. Obviously there are states that are a lot worse, but you'd also have to compare to what they pay out. To me, $1.3 billion is a lot that we're paying out with really low unemployment. In a relatively very healthy job market, probably the healthiest I've seen it in my lifetime. So it's a lot of money. So I guess I would like more data on that at some time, Chair, if we could. But with that, I get one more thing if I could, and then I'll give my time up. You had mentioned that you mail out 2 million pieces of paper a year. I bet I get at least 20 of them to me. And a lot of times it's silly things. The last one I just got this week, it's dated February 3rd, was a company I closed 3 years ago. Okay. And tell me you fined me $250 because I'm late on filing something for a company that doesn't exist anymore. So I think, the to-do list maybe could include tighten up your database a little bit. So it would save you that 67 cents on a stamp too. So, but thanks for the time, Chair. Thank you, Deputy Commissioner.
Rowe, did you want to clarify anything that Senator Draheim was asking relative to the fraud rate and whether we're recouping any of those dollars or anything along that lines that you think would be appropriate to share? Deputy Commissioner Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Senator. For just the last piece first, I will very much want to. I will follow up with the team on that business issue. So thank you for bringing that to my attention. On the, just on the recoupment piece, Mr. Chair, again, we are constantly pursuing and seeking to recoup any funds. And I do just want to clarify, right? I would not take, I wouldn't just multiply the that 7.3% figure times, times the total benefit payments. It's more of an administrative measure for the U.S. DOL used to assess program performance. But I appreciate the point, and we can absolutely follow up just to kind of have follow-up conversation to clarify that.
Senator Pratt.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and maybe before I jump into some of the questions, this came to my attention back in December. I got a call from some of my local business people telling me that their tax rates on UI were going to increase. And so I immediately reached out to DEED to find out, what was going on. And after a few weeks, I got a list of trust fund balances. And just to put it in context, Mr. Chair, when we started back in February, March of 2020, we had a trust fund reserve of about $1.7 billion. And we drained that down, and we ended up owing the federal government roughly a debt of about $1.5 billion. And we were able to use some of our one-time COVID money from the feds to pay off that debt. After we paid off that debt, we saw the trust fund balances increase. But when we take week 52, and I just took a static week, in 2024, we were 28% lower in the trust fund balance than we were a year prior. Now, what does that mean? What is 28%? The trust fund reserve balance was $675 million lower than it was the year prior. And that was shocking to me. And then when I went back, it was 38 or 39% lower. Wait a minute, again, a big drop. So, Mr. Chair, I've been trying to figure out how, what's been causing the trust fund to drop. And, if I go back to Mr. Rowe's presentation, he talked about the experience rate being about $650 million. And yes, Mr. Chair, we did in fact hold that flat when we paid off the debt. I think I disagree with the premise that that was a large tax cut to employers, because at the time that the governor was doing the stay-at-home orders, and we saw an unprecedented run on the unemployment system like we never had before. There was an agreement that we were going to hold both employers and employees harmless. And so it would have been improper of us to include those pandemic layoffs in the experience rate. And so I was really, when we go back to that collections by type, we see that the change in collections wasn't that massive. We didn't zero out the experience rate. We simply held it flat, and so the delta on that from where we were was more like 20 million. but we're still 16 million, or 675 million off. And so, just checking my math here, Mr. Chair. And I do have a math problem, so so it was 450 million drop from 23 to 24, a 675 million drop from 22 to 24. So, Mr. Rowe, you talk about how the tax rate is set. You saw that we were underfunded in the reserve probably in April of 2024 when you calculated the balance of the trust fund as of March 31st. What was that ratio when you calculated it?
Deputy Commissioner Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry, I'm not exactly understanding the question, Senator. Which ratio on when? And I don't, and just to.
Senator Pratt.
Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You have a slide here how the base rate, tax rate is set. And you have the formula balance of the trust fund on March 31st to total wages paid in covered employment. I'm just wondering what that ratio was at that point in time that you made that calculation in April of 2024.
Deputy Commissioner Rowe.
Mr. Chair, Senator, well, I think just to clarify one piece is that the department, per UI statute calculates tax rates for each employer on or before December 15th. And so we calculate tax rates closer to the end of the year. The data that are fed into that tax rate calculation are as of that date, but we run the tax calculation at the end of the year. And I don't have the exact number, I don't have the exact ratio in front of me, but I could get that and share it with you. Naturally it led to the ratio that led to the tax rate.
Senator Pratt, and just so that everyone is calculating time here, I only allocated 30 minutes for this based on what Senator Draheim said to me. And so we are obviously way over that. So I want to try to control the time as much as possible because we do have some bills on. And so if we want to have another conversation later, we can certainly talk about that, but I just want to make us aware of it. Senator Pratt.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And having one of those bills that's scheduled to be on the docket today, I am certainly cognizant of time. But Mr. Rowe, we knew that the trust fund was under-reserved in April of 2024. You had that balance. You may not have, I'm surprised you didn't do the calculation. But you knew what the March 31st balance was in April of 2024. How did you notify the legislature?
Deputy Commissioner Rowe.
Mr. Chair and Senator Pratt, as I said, we calculate the tax rate for the upcoming year is calculated, on or before December 15th per statutes 268.051. And when we had calculated that figure, we notified the chairs and ranking members of the committee.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I'm a little surprised that we have a balance as of March 31st and we don't even look at it until December 15th and we don't notify the legislature that that's happening. Mr. Chair, I've got a ton of questions. I'll hold off, but one I have is it's my understanding the Unemployment Advisory Council has not met for a while. Why aren't you running this information through them?
Deputy Commissioner Rowe.
Mr. Chair and Senator Pratt, we have not, candidly, we haven't had a ton of, I guess, interest from stakeholders on the UIAC. I think we certainly could convene them, and I think it could be a valuable exercise. But just from where I sit, we haven't had a ton of kind of incoming interest. But it's always it could very potentially be a valuable exercise.
Mr. Chair,
Senator Pratt.
I think it would be valuable for us to have a follow-up meeting, maybe give them some more time to come back with some firm numbers. By the simple math, the experience rating in and of itself does not account for the drop that we've seen in the UI trust fund. And I've asked, have we seen increased claims? Are we collecting all the reimbursables that we should be? I mean, that wasn't even discussed. We've seen an increase in the reimbursables collected, but we don't know if that is 100% collected or if we've got a large number in arrears. It still doesn't explain why we've seen a nearly 30% drop in the fund in a 12-month period. And I would like a better explanation of why we're not looking at this data more frequently so that update the legislature, because if I go back to about March of 2024, we were sitting at about a $1.2 billion reserve that got drawn down to almost just over $1 billion. And we know the trends, and I'm surprised that you, Mr. Chair, or Senator Draheim were never brought up to speed on what we were seeing in the UI Trust Fund. And I think that's an oversight, a gross oversight by the agency. And I'll leave it at that.
Senator Pa.
I will keep my questions short, too, and I'll reduce it to one. Thank you, Chair. So on here, I see a slide that talked about eligibility of applicants, and I'm wondering, how was the eligibility determined that it would be based on the average annual wage and that there would be a percentage of 5.3 of that wage? So like how did that come about, the numbers?
Deputy Commissioner Rowe.
Mr. Chair, Senator, that's what's in statute, I guess, is the answer. And I candidly, I wasn't around for the authoring of that statute, so I don't know. But I could certainly ask folks at the department who have been there longer than I have and get back to you.
Senator Pa.
Thank you for that. And I question that because I'm just thinking, like, I think that needs to change. The reason why I say that is I'm just thinking about $71,000, almost $72,000 in annual wage is the average. But we know that tens of thousands of our workers do not make that wage. In fact, many of them make around $40,000 a year. That means they would almost have to double that. So they would be at 9.54% before they meet that threshold, as someone who's making $72,000 would have to be only at 5.3 to make that threshold. So unless I'm interpreting this wrong, I'm just thinking, this seems really unfair for low-wage workers. Am I interpreting this wrong?
Deputy Commissioner Rowe.
Mr. Chair, Senator, so that 5.3% is, they have to have had that much paid to them in wages to be eligible for any UI. So I think it would be 5.3% times the $70,000 figure, which would be about they would have had to receive a minimum of about $3,500 in total wages. So below that threshold, no, they wouldn't be eligible. But above that threshold, they would be eligible. So if that helps clarify.
That does
Senator
too.
Pa.
Thank you, Chair. That does too. And so what I'm basing it on is that then really what the threshold really is that the 5.3, which is actually the $3,778, that's the actual amount they'd have to meet. And it's based on the average annual wage at almost $72,000, 5.3% of that equals is $3,778. So for someone who's making $40,000 a year, it actually would be a higher percentage threshold. It's at 9.5, almost 9.5%. And that seems really unfair to the thousands and thousands of low-wage workers, because it would mean that disproportionately they are being affected because they're asked to meet a higher threshold than those who are making higher income, which, as we know, they're the most already disproportionately affected or disadvantaged, and then all of a sudden now they have to meet a higher threshold. Am I right in that interpretation, or is this totally, am I reading this wrong?
Deputy Commissioner Rowe.
Mr. Chair and Senator, I mean, it's correct that that's the amount that they would have had to receive in wages, but that doesn't mean that's how much they would have to pay in taxes. UI taxes are paid, if it's a helpful point of clarification, UI taxes are paid solely by the employer and not by the employee. You're absolutely correct that it would be a relatively higher percentage of their of a low wage earners' wages to be eligible, but still, I think that all that means really is that somebody would have had to make a minimum of $3,778 to be eligible for any UI.
So it would,
Just for clarity, I think it'd be good for you all to get together between now and the next hearing, so you have that clarification, because the tax is not paid by the employee. Okay, so is that okay, Senator Pratt, that you guys can get together and then you can get some clarification to the
Yes.
information that's there?
Thank you, Chair. And yes, I would love to follow up on this to better understand it and also to make sure that it is equitable among people who make higher wages and people who make lower wages. Because if I'm reading it right, even if employees are not paying the UI, that it is based off of their wages. And if that means it takes them longer to meet that threshold as someone who may be making higher wages would. So, but I would love to have that conversation offhand. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And Senator Nelson, we gave you a little time here, so
Yes.
If it's just one question, because then I'm going to stop this presentation and reschedule it because we have some other things to
Yes.
do. Is it something that,
Yeah.
it's something you want to ask that's a burning question that you have to have
Thank you.
answered right now?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Nelson.
Very brief. I'm still thinking about the schools. Thank you for reminding me that there are those reimbursing employers. So I'm going to get that information. But I want to ask you if, as I look at that information, would this be an accurate assessment? So when I see the amount of that one-time appropriation that we gave to the schools to pay for the new unemployment eligibility of part-time workers, would it be accurate to realize that that is an amount now that they are going to have to somehow figure out in their budgets? I mean, would it be about the same amount? And I just want to make sure that there's no other payment. In other words, it sounds to me like we're leaving them with a hole in their budget. And I just want you to comment on if that's an accurate assessment, and I'll get the numbers. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Deputy Commissioner Rowe, if you want to answer, or we have some information about the governor's budget as well, so we could have our fiscal guru talk to us about that. Deputy Commissioner Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Senator Nelson. I was going to say something to that effect, that I believe there are some active policy considerations underway on that front. Just in terms of how it's kind of applied to UI, right? While I don't have the crystal ball and I don't know exactly what will happen kind of going forward, I think, and the MDE report has more of the breakouts kind of specifically, so you could see the trending year over year. I'm not aware of any kind of change, certainly from a UI administrative perspective, there's nothing that would have changed from that front. Do more people apply because there are more layoffs? Do less people apply because there are less layoffs? That would naturally impact the numbers.
Thank you. Last comment will be from Ms. Nomer. If there's anything that you think that we should add about the governor's proposal or anything of that nature.
Sure, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members, I was just conversing with Jenna Hofer. She's the fiscal analyst for the E12 committee. And she let me know that in 2023, there was $135 million to reimburse districts for the cost of the UI expansion from fiscal year 24 to 27, and then that pot of money is expected to be depleted by mid-fiscal year 2026. So in the governor's budget, there's a proposed additional funding of $30 million one time to fill that gap in fiscal year 2026. And then I think following depletion of the funds, districts will be able to bill some expenditures to the special education pot, though they won't receive 100% reimbursement from special education aid. Any remaining costs after that will be paid from the district's general fund. And that's all I know about it. I'd say if you have any additional questions, to direct them to me or Jenna Hofer, and I can direct them to Jenna Hofer on the E12 committee.
Thank you for that
Thank you.
information. And with that being said, thank you for coming. We'll reschedule it for some time because we have to get through some bills, and we appreciate it. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we're now going to go to members. Just so you know, we're not going to hear Senate File 661 today. We're going to go immediately to Senate File 799, Senator Gustafson. And if the testifiers would come up, that would be great as well. And as soon as you're ready, Senator, you can certainly start your presentation before we get to your testifiers who will have 2 minutes each. Senator Gustafson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to members of the committee. Thank you to Senator Housley, who's also a co-author on this bill. Senate File 799 appropriates funds to strengthen the Minnesota Family Resiliency Partnership. It's federally known as the Displaced Homemakers Program. For over 45 years, this program has assisted displaced homemakers entering or re-entering the workforce as they navigate the personal and challenging loss of a spouse or partner due to death, abandonment, divorce, or disability. 96% of program participants are women ineligible for unemployment benefits because they are primarily homemakers and financially dependent on a spouse or partner. The MFRP is the only existing state program specifically designed to assist displaced homemakers as they face unique socioeconomic obstacles during major life challenges. They prioritize tools for achieving economic self-sufficiency. These are people who want to get into the workforce but don't have the skills that often make them a desired candidate for hire. So taking a holistic and client-driven approach, the program is more than just a simple workforce development. Through one-on-one counseling, weekly workshops, and individualized action plans, it's proven extremely effective with a 97% completion rate, providing $350,000 to be divided equally among 6 regional partners throughout the state. It will ensure that displaced homemakers continue to receive the resources they need to face, overcome their challenges, and get them into the workforce so that they could be properly trained for a job that fits them. I have testifiers. I'll let them introduce themselves, and happy to answer questions after that. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. All right, Jean Keenan, you can start us off, and remember, you got 2 minutes, and thank you, and welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members. Thank you for this opportunity. I would also like to thank Senator Gustafson and the members of this committee who have supported our work over the years. The Minnesota Family Resiliency Partnership is a statewide network of 6 providers offering family stabilization and pre-employment services. The program has long, stable leadership with directors having 20-plus years of experience. We are the only program in the state specifically designed to support individuals who need to enter the workforce due to abandonment, divorce, disability, or death of a spouse or partner. It is our goal to interrupt the downward spiral that participants often face after the loss of a family's primary wage earner. This wraparound program is offered at no cost to participants, all of whom are at or below 200% of the federal poverty guideline. Each individual works with a provider to develop a unique action plan. We help participants to develop essential transferable skills and effective job search strategies. Additionally, we provide direct support dollars to help participants overcome barriers that would impede their progress to self-sufficiency, meaning things like a minor car repair or books for school or emergency child care. Most importantly, the program helps families to stabilize by providing trauma-informed care. Participants are eligible for services for 12 months and in some cases beyond that when necessary. You see 73% of the program participants are survivors of intimate partner violence and 28% enter the program unhoused. Last year, those who exited the program as employed did so at an average wage of $20.38 per hour. We are a program that has always been transparent and very highly effective. At last calculation, the state realized a $26.89 to $1 return on its investment in the program by moving people away from public assistance. This calculation doesn't even consider the human capital created as participants move to self-sufficiency. We are asking for your support of Senate File 799. Thank you. Now we'd like to share one of our many success stories.
All right, so welcome to the committee, and identify yourself for the record. Are you Kimberly Pilgrim?
Yes.
All right, you have 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members. At the request of Betty Rail, I'm here to share her story. Betty cannot be with us today as she is unable to take off time from work. Quote, I was a homemaker for 30 years and raised 3 children. One afternoon, my husband left for an appointment and never returned. I was left isolated, grief-stricken, suicidal, and fearful. I did not have an income and had little experience with driving a vehicle. I didn't even know how to put gas in my own car. I had no community support, and my grown children were living out of state. Someone called me and told me about the Minnesota Family Resiliency Partnership, so I made an appointment. I was very afraid, but I drove to the office at Central Lakes College. I was too afraid to go in, and the director met me in the parking lot. I attended workshops that helped me manage grief, learn self-esteem, manage loss, life skills, and self-confidence. I also had the help of other participants who taught me how to put gas in my car and treated me as family. The program supported me with car repairs, gas, clothing, food, and resources. At first, much of my time was one-on-one preparation, and as I was gaining strength, at 53 years old, I knew I had to do something. With individual career planning, I decided to enroll in college in the administrative assistant program. While in college, I did work study and was giving hands-on office skill training. I graduated with honors, and because I had gained such strength, I was fully prepared for employment. Within 3 months of graduation, I was interviewed and hired full-time with a livable wage and great benefits. I would have not made it without this program. I urge you to recognize its profound impact and continue funding and supporting this vital initiative.
Thank you so much. Your time is up. I appreciate it. If there's any additional testimony that you want to share with the committee, you could feel free to send that in to us, and we'll make sure that we get it to everyone.
Thank you.
So my first question is going to go to Ms. Keenan. I recognize that the amount of money that you all received last time was roughly $500,000 over the biennium and came from the workforce, I think at least in 2022 and 23 came from the Workforce Development Fund, but then as I mentioned, $500,000 for 24-25, but now you're asking for $700,000 over the biennium. First of all, I want to know if that's true based on what I see, and secondly, can you share with us why the additional request and what will we get as a return on the investment? Ms. Keenan.
Certainly, Mr. Chair, members. So we have always looked at this request as a bridge sort of funding as we work to make changes to our base funding. And so in the last biennium's request, we were anticipating that we may be able to move forward at a different funding source. That did not happen for us. And as a result of that and the continued bits of inflation that we're experiencing, we asked for less than we really needed last time. Now we're asking for what it is we actually need to be able to make it.
And then the latter part of my question was, what can we expect, especially if there's going to be this additional $200,000? Like, how many people you serving now? With this additional resource, you're anticipating serving X. Can you speak to that, Ms. Keenan?
Sure, Mr. Chair, members. It is our intention that we would continue to provide the individualized services that we're providing, that we would reach as many people as we could, to maximize our capacity. One of the issues that we face is ongoing increases in prices to provide mileage for staff. A lot of these folks, we have to meet them where they're at. So for example, if we're officed in Mankato, but we've got to drive an hour to Fairmont to actually meet someone where they're at to provide that service. We've got all of those additional costs. Most of these programs are rural with a lot of staff time and mileage to be able to meet people where, literally and figuratively, where they're at.
Any additional discussion? Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Gustafson, this is a great piece of legislation. If you still have room for me on there, I would very much like to support this initiative. This is what we should be doing in the Jobs Committee, which is really helping, in this case, displaced homemakers, family providers get into the workforce. And I see the workforce development, which I'm very familiar with in Southeast Minnesota, does a phenomenal job. And so I'm very supportive. And I do have to wonder, and I'm not sure if somebody has an answer to this, but to the chairman's question, why is it costing more? I mean, of course, there's inflation, but one of the things that I've often wondered about, and particularly in these type of job placement programs, the inflationary aspect and the fact, I don't know that this would be important, but we do know, at least in Southeast Minnesota, I'm wondering if the increasing minimum wage has any impact and what that might be on the cost to the Workforce Development Center or to displaced homemakers. I'm not sure if it does. Maybe it's a positive thing, but I was just curious about if that might be one of the cost drivers.
Anyone in particular? Senator Gustafson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think, and I'll let my testifiers who do this, I think it's more the job training and the amount of money it takes to go into those programs. A lot of who they serve are in rural parts of Minnesota, and so there's a lot of expenses that come with some of those workforce training programs. The wage part of it, I believe, is just the benefit of these people who have gone through the training and then now have that livable wage, like we heard from the testifier. Mr. Chair, if my experts have anything more to add, I think that I might have answered it, but maybe not.
Anything more to add, Senator Keenan, or did Senator Gustafson hit it on the head?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really think if that answers your question, Senator, I wouldn't have anything to add except to say that because we are a program that believes in trying to get people to self-sufficiency, certainly we want our staff to remain at that same level. And once you've done the recruitment and the training, you want to be able to retain good people who are able to provide good quality services.
Any other questions about Senate File 799? Seeing none, Senate File number 799 will be laid over for possible inclusion. Thank you, Senator Gustafson. Members, we will now go to Senate File 901, Senator Pratt. And I recognize that you have at least 3 testifiers present and one that is, and then there's another person who's going to testify virtually. Senator Pratt, you can start us off, and if you want to do the A1 amendment, let us know. Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd be happy to do the A1 amendment. The A1 amendment just helps the bill conform with budget rules, and I wanted to make sure that we got that on before Senator Mohamed asked me some tough questions.
Senator Pratt offers the A1 amendment. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The A1 amendment is adopted. Senator Pratt to Senate File number 901 as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senate File 901 is a continuance of a pilot program that this committee and you, Mr. Chair, included in the 2023 Jobs Omnibus Bill. And, I want to first start off by thanking my co-authors, Senators Howe, Seeberger, Hoffman, and Lang for their support. I also want to give a special shout out to Senator Hawj, who's also indicated his interest and support for the bill as well. I appreciate that. Abijah's on the backside is an equine-assisted therapy specifically designed to meet the needs of first responders. And since their first grant, Mr. Chair, they have seen some amazing results. And so what we're going to see in this bill is, one, it provides funding for another biennium, but 2, also allows retired first responders to qualify, and I think that's going to be a very important addition. We'd also like to make sure that corrections officers and EMS dispatch folks can also take part in the therapy as well. Those were, I think, some oversights in the bill that we had last year that we'd like to try to correct. And with that, Mr. Chair, to make sure that we're on time, I'll turn it over to my testifiers.
And Senator Pratt, would you like for me to go to Sally Mixon?
Please.
All right, welcome to the committee, Ms. Mixon. If you will identify yourself for the record and
Sure.
provide us your 2 minutes worth of testimony. Thank you again.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Sally Mixon, founder of Abijah's on the Backside. First and foremost, this is also an opportunity for us to say thank you. Because of the bill that was passed last session, we've had a 98% success rate. And what I mean by success rate is that 98% of our first responders have stayed in the workforce. So there are 4 individuals that did retire, 2 of which were at age of retirement. One of those retirees did share he probably would have taken his own life. And so now he's able to retire and be happy and successful and move on to that next chapter. The other 2 came to us at a pretty late spot in their career, where I do think if we were able to kind of get a hold of them before, we might have had a different result. We also, as at Abijah's, we have amazing donors and community partnerships, and so we were able to continue to serve our retired first responders as well. And we have a law enforcement officer who retired. We saw him for the last year or 2, and he just informed us 2-ish weeks ago he's going back into the department, which is amazing. Like that is so cool to me. So I'm excited. I'm excited for you to share or to hear from Nick. I'm so grateful for y'all for passing this. I would love, obviously, for it to be passed again. You're helping us save lives, and it means the world to me.
Thank you for your testimony. We'll now go to Nick Jacobson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Nick Jacobson, current police officer with the city of Lakeville. I don't think 2 minutes is enough to justify how much Abijah's on the Backside has helped me personally. I'll try and do my best to kind of bring it quickly into 2 minutes. I was enlisted in the U.S. Marine Corps Infantry, deployed 2 times to Afghanistan. On those deployments, I lost over half my squad. More were injured. After the military life, switching over to civilian life, I couldn't make that transition very well. Basically trying to find any reason or doubt that I needed just to get back into the fight, because that's all I was really knowing anymore. A friend of mine reached out, gave me the information to Abijah's on the Backside. He's a current SEAL commander. He recognized things in me that he saw with his team members. I was skeptical, being through many different types of therapies through the government, VA, and private sector that just didn't work, and that could be on me as well. So I begrudgingly gave it a shot, met with Sally and her crew. I'm going to spend the most amazing experience, something I'll never forget when it comes to when Sally says you can lie to us as the workers and the therapists, but you can't lie to the horses, and that is so true. But she has made my life so much better as a man, a husband, and a father, and made it so that I no longer really wish to go back into any type of combat.
Thank you so very much. And Senator Pratt, do you have Andrew Doerr that's with us?
Yep.
Andrew Doerr, hopefully I'm pronouncing your name correctly, but if you can identify yourself for the record, and welcome to the committee.
You did, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Andrew Doerr, and I'm here today representing the Minnesota Horsemen's Benevolent and Protective Association. The HBPA is an association of owners and workers that race thoroughbred horses out at Canterbury Park. And there's really nothing that much more I can add to Mr. Jacobson's powerful testimony. So I'll just quickly say that we're very supportive of this bill. Appreciate your support in the past, Mr. Chair. Abijah's is an important and integral piece of our community on the backside at Canterbury Park. And I'll just finish by extending an invitation out to any members of the committee that want to come out and see for yourself firsthand where Sally does this amazing work. I'm happy to help facilitate that. So, Mr. Chair, with that, I appreciate the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you so much for being here. Now we have one testifier, Mariam Egal, who is going to be with us virtually. Are you there? I see your iPhone, but I see you are muted. Are you there? If not, we're going to go on, and you're going to miss your opportunity. All right. She did not respond. So we will now go to the committee. Any questions for Senator Pratt or any of the testifiers? Senator Draheim.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Senator Pratt. And I don't know if Senator Pratt remembers, but my mom had horses. And she could afford them after I left the house. So it was cheaper to feed 16 horses than me. So, and I'm not joking either. So, so I've been around horses a lot, and I agree they're very, 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 very addictive to spend time with, and wonderful creatures. And I had a niece that kind of went through a similar program that helped her overcome some issues she was dealing with. So thank you for doing it, and I hope we can grow this program. And I think, Senator Pratt, you were looking to expand from previous years, right? Who was qualified? Can you just go into that and give us a brief, or?
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Senator Draheim. Yeah, and I'll let Ms. Mixon explain the situation, but she touched on it a little bit that there's a need to help some of the retired police officers. They may retire from being first responders, but the purpose of this grant is to help our first responders, one, stay in that role, or two, be able to enter the workforce in maybe some other capacity. So that's why this is a workforce bill versus, say, a health committee bill, because it is very much structured to that. But I'll let Ms. Mixon talk about the retired officers and why we felt like we had a hole in who we were being able to serve.
Ms. Mixon, as briefly as possible.
Yes, sir. Yeah, so the retired population we've continued to see over time, over the last few years, and so many of them, the suicide rate goes up tremendously when they retire because their purpose, their identity is kind of taken. And so we really wanted to kind of include them in this with the hope and heart to save those lives, with them being able to return, if not back into law enforcement or first responder type of work, then to the workforce in general and be productive citizens.
Any other discussion? Senator Draheim.
I just wanted to give a shout out to Officer Jacobson. Thank you for your service to the country and the city of Lakeville. Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, last comments from Senator Pratt before we lay the bill over for possible inclusion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and members. You also have a letter in your packets from Randy Sampson, who is the CEO of Canterbury. And just to expand on what Ms. Mixon said about the retired, what we find is sometimes in order to protect their privacy, the retired officers or first responders, they'll retire so that information doesn't necessarily go back to their departments. There's a fear that diagnosis and that treatment will hinder their careers in that. So they choose retirement and then seek treatment. And we think we can get them, not only, as Ms. Mixon said, maybe back into being first responders, but maybe in other roles. Mr. Chair, a 98% success rate, I think, is amazing. We don't see that type of success rate here, and I would just appreciate the committee's consideration on continuing the pilot program and allowing us to serve, to test out serving people that did not qualify under the first grant.
Thank you so very much, Senator Pratt, and thank you to your testifiers. We appreciate you being here. Senate File 901 as amended will be laid over for possible inclusion. Thank you so much. We'll now go to Senator Hurd. We're going to present or listen to Senate File 922. Senator Hurd, you have one testifier. That would be Alma Flores. If you could join Senator Hurd at the table. And when you're ready, Senator Hurd, if you will go forward with your presentation.
Thank you, Chair Champion, and thank you, members. Senate File 922 appropriates $2 million for each fiscal year, 2026 and 2027, to Latino Economic Development Center to assist their work in economic development and workforce. LEDC for short, has been assisting, supporting, financing, launching hundreds of successful micro entrepreneurs since 2003. They work in the Metro and Long Prairie, Wilmore, Owatonna, Austin, St. Cloud, and Rochester, among other cities. They help entrepreneurs through every step of launching a business, including trainings. LEDC also provides one-on-one technical assistance to farmers, emerging farmers, and help provide capital for land acquisition. I only have one testifier, Mr. Chair, and my testifier will explain on the work of LEDC and what they did, they have been doing around our state. So with me here is Ama Forrest, Executive Director of LEDC.
Welcome to the committee. If you identify yourself for the record and give us your testimony for a couple minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Hello, members of the Jobs and Economic Development Committee. My name is Alma Flores, and I am the Executive Director of the Latino Economic Development Center. LEDC has been helping Minnesota small businesses launch and grow for more than 2 decades. LEDC provides full services for businesses and entrepreneurs across the state of Minnesota, and we are a federally certified CDFI. We do this work by providing access to capital and technical assistance through workshops and one-on-one business advising, workforce training, lending for everything from working capital to land acquisition for business expansion and retention. We also provide technical assistance to farmers for land acquisition, training, lending, and machinery procurement. Last year, LEDC helped more than 20 businesses access the capital they need to take their businesses to the next level, and worked with more than 800 aspiring entrepreneurs and small businesses. This legislation is looking to expand the work LEDC does by increasing our capacity and programming across the state, tailored to the workforce needs of the 6 regional labor markets. Currently, we are present in 3 of the 6 labor markets, Central, Metro, and Southeast Minnesota. Our programs would provide training into high-demand jobs in the STEM fields, nursing, consumer electronics, healthcare management, to name a few, the trades, plumbing, electrical, roofing, drywall, for instance, innovative manufacturing such as 3D and AI machinery, daycare providers in order to keep our workforce worry-free as they expand their families, trucking and supply management, to name a few. This capacity building and program support will help the state of Minnesota fill jobs across the state and improve our workforce and economy where we are seeing the most need, and have the added feature of increasing our competitive edge in the nation. LEDC wants to be part of that solution. Thank you for your time. Today, we urge you to support SF 922, and I am happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. Senator Herr, I have one question. Are you attempting to put this appropriation in the base? Because as I look at it, as I look at the language, I just want to make sure that we have the clarity for the committee. Senator Herr.
In terms of the base? The base appropriation bill, or?
I'm asking,
Mr. Chair,
was that your intent? Because we're certainly not in a position to put anything in the base, but I wanted to be clear as to what you're asking. Senator Herr.
Mr. Chair, I'll defer to you to see where it's appropriate. You know, it's a need of the LEDC organization to make sure we continue the work that they've been doing. So, but I'll leave it to your judgment to see what's the best route.
Senator Herr, thank you for that clarity. I'm just letting folks know that there's no way that we have money to put anything in the base. So I'm just being honest and clear about that so that we don't get a ton of people coming asking for that and then putting me in the position to have to say no, even though it's a great organization and I see someone out there like, really, I can't have it. That's right. Any other questions, Senator Pop, before we lay this bill over for possible inclusion?
So I don't necessarily have thank you, Chair. I don't necessarily have a question, but I do just want to say that I'm very aware of the work that your organization does. And I just want to thank you so much because kind of back to what I was saying about the organization HAP when they came before us is that organizations like yours is meeting a need in which you really do have a specialized gift or superpower in serving the people that come to you, because trust is number one. They trust your organization. They know that's where they can come, and they will get help even if there's a language barrier. And also that there's a cultural understanding that comes with that help. And even though people don't see that, we have a lot of challenges in our unique communities that only people who understand those challenges know how to work with us. And so I see that very much so that your organization has done fantastic work in that. I just want to say that I totally support this appropriation for that reason, because there are many people coming to you that will not be going to other organizations to get help.
Appreciate that, Senator.
Any other questions for the testifier? Seeing none, Senator Hurd, your last comments before we lay Senate File 922 on the table for possible inclusion. Senator Hurd.
And thank you, Mr. Chair, for asking me a good question about the base, so that we are clarified to folks the budget we have this year. And it's important for folks out there, including LEDC, and I think I give the right answer to it. And I know time is tough, but I do see the importance of the work that LEDC has take on and has been effective for more than 25 years. And I appreciate Senator Pop for speaking in support as well, and hope that you can include this consideration in a high place in this year omnibus, or as it goes to standalone. Thank you.
With that being said, Senate File number 922 will be laid over for possible inclusion. Thank you, Senator Hurd, and thank you to your testifier.
Thank you.
We'll now go to Senate File number 1079, Senator Mohamed. And it's my understanding that Senator Mohamed has two testifiers, Heather Walsh, as well as Shane Pearson? Yeah. Pearson. And when you're ready, Senator Mohamed, you can start with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and members of the committee. Before you is Senate File 1079, which appropriates $450,000 from the Workforce Development Fund to Jobs Foundation to support the repowered Workforce Readiness Program in fiscal year 2026. The Jobs Foundation, operating under the Repowered brand, is a well-established organization dedicated to serving individuals with significant barriers to employment, primarily recently incarcerated individuals. Through its transitional work readiness program, Repowered combines high-quality work experience, training, and support services at a 91,000 square foot electronics recycling facility. The program focuses on helping participants learn valuable skills, build confidence, and develop a growth mindset, while emphasizing that no one is defined by their past offenses. This approach leads to strong outcomes. 83% of the participants completing the critical first 90 days, 83% secure employment upon graduation, and Repowered recidivism rate for 2024 is 4%. Repowered is seeking funding to support its training, support services, safety improvements, and economic assistance, enabling them to continue their impactful work. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Mohamed. We will now go to Heather Walsh. If you will give us your 2 minutes of testimony and identify yourself for the record. Thank you so much and welcome.
Thank you, Chair Champion and members of the committee. My name is Heather Walsh, and I am the CEO of Jobs Foundation, an established nonprofit doing business as Repowered. Our mission is to transform lives by providing extensive work experience for people facing significant barriers to employment, specifically recently incarcerated individuals. Through a unique combination of work, training, and personal development, we prepare individuals to be more valuable employees with expanding futures. Our work results in very strong outcomes, life-changing increases to earning potential, and consistently low recidivism rates. We are a disciplined organization, and we do the difficult work every single day. Repowered's program works, and the reason I know it works is it works for participants and employers. In a moment, you'll hear from Shane Pearson, a work readiness trainee. But first, let me share some feedback from an employer that we recently received. Joseph Long from Soldier Trucking said, quote, "I could not be more impressed with all 4 of my new employees. Punctual, respectful, eager to learn, and most importantly, no attitude. We are blessed to have a relationship with Repowered," end of quote. Strong employer support like this demonstrates the quality of our program more than any metric. We respectfully request your support for the Jobs Foundation bill so that we can serve more participants. With this program, we unlock hope, allowing talented individuals to build confidence, break the cycle of recidivism, and rebuild their lives. Repowered provides the opportunity for them to succeed. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much for your testimony. We'll now go to Shane Pearson. If you would identify yourself for the record and give us your 2 minutes worth of testimony, and welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Chair. Members, my name is Shane Pearson. I'm honored to be here before you today. First, I would like to give you a little bit of my background, which I believe will highlight why Repowered is so important to me. Second, I want to share with you my personal experience, growth, and success during my employment with Repowered. And lastly, why I strongly believe Repowered is so valuable to our community. On May 7th, 2024, I was released from prison after serving a 30-year life sentence. While incarcerated, I was able to accomplish many things: educational certificates, vocational training, cognitive behavior classes. I was even a member of the Restorative Justice Committee. While preparing for my release, I explored several job possibilities. Repowered was first on my list because of the wide variety of opportunities that Repowered offers. I also served time with an individual who is now the head of our Repowered HR department and was inspired by his success. Repowered has given me the support and opportunity I have needed to grow and develop into a contributing member of our community. I have learned computer skills, truck driving skills, as well as leadership, stewardship skills during my time with Repowered. Repowered has been a supportive environment that has allowed me to continue my educational goals in HVAC certification through MCTC. Through all of this, I have learned that I can create real value, not only at work, but in our community, as well as at home. Finally, Repowered is valuable to our community. They have given me, above all, hope, not a handout, but a hand up. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony, and thank you for all your success. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I have one first question for either Senator Mohamed or Ms. Walsh. It looks like in 2025, you received $200,000, but now you're asking for $450,000. So that's, you're asking for additional resources of $250,000. Can you state the reason for the additional resources and what will be the return on the investment from the committee?
Yes, absolutely. First of all, thank you very much. The appropriation last year was generous, and I would like to just say that we used it, and in this month, it is our final invoice to complete that appropriation, the reimbursement for that appropriation. That appropriation did cover a wide variety of items, including safety, direct services, as well as direct customer training. That is only a small slice of the program. Our program is up to an 18-month program. So when we bring on a work readiness trainee, they can stay with us for up to 18 months. So as an organization, we are making a commitment for 40 hours of full-time work plus benefits for each of those individuals. And as you can see, we are serving a very select segment of the population who values and deserves this additional attention. So our cost far exceeds what we were given last year. And that's why we are asking for more. I would like to make one final point that I think is very important. Our organization is 85%, our budget is funded 85% by our earned revenue. and earned income as selling refurbished electronics. That remainder is simply because split between the government funding and individual donors and contributed income through foundations. We are asking to increase that so that we can serve more people next year. We always have a waiting list.
With that being said, you said you wish to serve more people. How many people did you serve before, and what will the increased number be, or at least plan to be, in order to not justify, but encourage us to do an increase of $250,000? Ms. Walsh.
Thank you, Chair. Right, so this year we served 71 individuals in our program. The additional dollars that we're asking for would be dependent on how long they stay with the program. So on the one pager, our average this year was in 2024 was 7.5 months. So if everyone stayed 7.5 months on average, right, we would increase that number between 10 to 20 people.
So 10 to 20 people. Okay. Any other questions from the committee? Senator Nelson.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple quick ones. First, thank you for including the 990s. I think that is really important, and Mr. Chair, I'm glad to see that in our packets. But that does bring up a couple questions, and if you can answer them briefly, fine. If not, you're welcome to talk to me afterwards. But I did notice that the current year, 2023, saw, significantly less contributions than the year prior. And I just wondered why that might be, if there's some.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you for that question and the opportunity to explain that. We had a leadership change in the end of 2022 and 2023. Our CEO departed. I joined the organization mid-year 2023. So it was difficult for us to get any contributed income from foundations until the new CEO has a full 12 months in the seat for stability and for vision and leadership. And so that contributed to some of the challenges we had with foundations and contributed income.
Thank you. Thank you. No further questions.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, Senator Mohamed, your closing comments before we lay Senate File 1079 on the table for possible inclusion. Senator Mohamed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to my co-author, Senator Draham. And thank you, Shane, for sharing your story. It's powerful, and thank you for doing the work that you do, and hopefully we can find some funds for them. I appreciate you for hearing the bill.
With that being said, Senate File number 1079 will be laid on the table for possible inclusion. Members, we had one person who was online. I did go to them online when Senator Pratt's bill was being heard, which was Senate File 901 as amended, and the person wasn't there, but then I saw some movement, so I'm going to try one more time to still give them 2 minutes if they are there. Miss Mariam Egal.
Yes.
All right, we called you earlier.
Thank you.
And you were not there, so we're going to give you 2 minutes now.
Was that the mental health?
Yes, it was on the Senator Pratt bill, which was mental health therapy to first responders suffering from trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder.
Thank you very much, Chair and committee. I'm sorry maybe I stepped out for a minute. Yeah, I'm all for that bill and anything for mental health. Anything that relates to empowering people with, first of all, giving them the treatment that they need, and secondly, helping them, build their resumes and do work readiness and get them prepared to reintegrate in the community in a meaningful way. So I, support that.
All right, well, thank you so very much for your testimony. We sincerely appreciate it. Any questions for the testifier? Seeing none, thank you so very much. Members, that concludes our business for this meeting. Our next hearing will be on Monday, February 17th. And 17th, as you know, we're trying to make sure that we hear the bills that have been given to our committee. I'd love to just encourage you to be here on time so we can get a quorum and move forward. And so that's not intended for any a specific individual. That's us as a committee. Thank you so very much. With that, this meeting is adjourned.